Nirasya sarva sandeham akikritya sudarshanam prakashita rahasyam tam bhajami gurumishwaram. Shri Govinda Pararavinda Marupananya Vilashojitan Purna Prema Rasotsavo Jalamano Vritti Prasannananan Shashvad Krishna Katha Mahamrita Payo Rasho Mura Kedato Bande Bhagavatani Mananudavam Murdnani Patyakshito. Namo Mahavaranyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Tvishe Nama Jayatam Surato Pangor Mama Mandamate Gati Matsarvasva Param Bhojo Radha Madana Mohano Kulari Devatamar Madana Mohan Jar Sevak Raghunatha Rup Sanatan Jaya Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath Echai Goshai Kori Charana Vandan Jaha Hoite Vignanasha Bhishta Puran Krishna Dasa Kaviraja Rasika Bhaktamaj Jai Rachilo Caitanya-caritamrta Gaura Govinda Lila Shunite Galai Shila Tahate Na Hoido Murachita Jeba Nahi Buji Keva Shunite Seha Kiad Bhuta Caitanya-carit Krishna upajibe priti janivera serariti shunile borohohit Shriyatam nityam giyatam mura Chintyatam bhaktas Caitanya-caritamrta. So by the grace of Shri Kali Yuga Pavana, the Svabhajana Vibhajana, Prayojana Avatar, Prema Purushottam, Karuna Maha Sagar, Shri Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and his beloved Parshad, nourished by Shri Rup, Shri Sanatan, Shri Raghunath, and Shri Jiva, a graceful swan in the inexhaustible reservoir of Chaitanya Lila, wherefrom the very essence of Krishna Lila streams, in the 10 directions, Sri Krishna Das Kaviraja Goswami Pad. Again, today we'll continue our discussion of Sri Caitanya-caritamrta, specifically the Sanatan Shiksha, here in Madhya Lila chapter 22. We've come to the section about Shraddha. So having concluded in our last discussion a section about Sadhu Sangha, we heard a few payars and various verses of Bhagavatam explaining the importance of Sadhu Sangha, of bathing in the dust of the feet of the Mahatmas. Then the primary or the principal initial effect that this Sadhu Sangha has, the sanskar that it produces in the mind, this is what is called great fortune. This ati bhagya or mahabhagya is said to be this, the sanskar that is acquired from the association of a Mahatma. And it is on the strength of that sanskara that one acquires shraddha, or conviction, in the path of bhakti, such that one becomes eligible to follow that path. So this is the subject matter we're presently discussing. And to refer to this in gist, so to speak, then Sriman Mahaprabhu, as he's instructing Sanatana Gosvami, he refers to the final teaching of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, where he advises Arjuna to take to the path of bhakti specifically, and he prefaces this instruction by saying that it is his most confidential instruction of all. So in our last reading, we looked at how the commentators have explained this term most confidential of all, and a gradation in confidentiality, if you will. Jiva Gosvami reads it as that confidential or guhya refers to knowledge of Brahman, implying that knowledge related to following the path of karma, the duties of one's varna, one's ashram, one's social responsibilities, this is not confidential. This is knowledge. This is what people know. This is what is generally taught or advised for people in society. But knowledge of an imperceptible object, knowledge of something that requires detachment from what is loosely called vishay, or sensory experience and sensory pursuits, that is a form of knowledge which is confidential. In other words, it requires special eligibility in order to be taught, which the implication being, there's no point in teaching it to people who aren't fit to hear about it. In other words, when you're completely riveted upon sensory experience, to start being taught how to achieve that which has nothing to do with sensory experience, pouring water off of a slick surface, off the leaf of a lotus, it'll just pour off. It won't stick, it won't be absorbed, it won't be something of interest, it won't be something applied. So this is, practically speaking, how we can understand the role of what is called adhikar, or eligibility. That every set of instructions, every set of practices, every aim and interest has a particular scope, or a particular audience in modern language, for which it is applicable. So, Jiva Gosvami explained that confidential knowledge refers to knowledge of Brahman, but more confidential knowledge refers to knowledge of Paramatma, and fully confidential knowledge refers to knowledge of Bhagavan. And the most confidential of all, or sarva guhya tamam, was knowledge of Swayam Bhagavan, Sri Krishna. So this was how Jiva Gosvami explained this gradation in confidentiality referred to here in Gita 1864. Chakravarti Pad alternately described confidentiality as knowledge that relates to the achievement of moksha, or in other words, the path of gyan. More confidential knowledge as knowledge related to the path of bhakti. The most confidential knowledge as the path of pure bhakti, what we would call uttam bhakti in Rupa Goswami's language. So then, this most confidential of all would be uttam bhakti to Bhagavan Sri Krishna specifically. So, these are points we discussed in our last class. I'm just recapping them. And we also covered how Jiva Gosvami elsewhere speaks of this idea of confidentiality in the Krama Sandarbha, referring to the same word, guhya, as being also something which is not perceptible or not understandable to persons who don't have a sufficient degree of purification of the psyche, or what is called chitta shuddhi. So, as it's explained in the Gita, jnanam kama, that desire covers one's knowledge. One can only understand things to the extent that their desires allow them, so to speak. So when one is, when the psyche is chock full of, worldly desires, then one can hear but will still not understand knowledge pertaining to the path of bhakti. So this was another point that he explained, another way of understanding the idea of confidentiality, or relative degree of purity that's required, which is something that we'll come back to a little bit later as we discuss the adhikar for uttam bhakti. We'll go through here in the Caitanya-caritamrta the whole discussion of adhikar, and then that topic will come back again at the end of our discussion. So remember that bit. Anyhow, last time we began with the commentaries of Swami Pad, Chakravarti Pad, and Baladeva Dibhushan on these two verses. So we'll hopefully get through the rest of them today. So we left off last time with Swami Pad's commentary on 1864. I think I'll just read it one more time so we can hear all three together, and we'll proceed. So I'm In the middle, I think it's, page 6 or 7 in the PDF that I shared last week. Maybe if anyone doesn't have it, someone else could make it available if it's required. So, Sri Samipad comments on the first verse under discussion, which introduces this most confidential of all teachings as follows. So for those who are unable to contemplate in full this exceedingly profound Gita Shastra, he graciously, personally collects and states its essence with 3 verses, Sarvaguya Tamam. So as we discussed last time, the previous verse Krishna had instructed, now you reflect on what I taught you, and you do as you wish. Yatechchasi tathakuru. So then Krishna thinks, well, it's not so easy to understand everything I taught, or, to contemplate this entire thing, is a challenge. So let me also summarize the gist of it, or we might say in modern language, let me give you a hint what I was ultimately pointing at. So, although my most confidential advice, in comparison even to all of it that is confidential, has been explained to me by me here and there throughout our conversation, here it is being spoken again by me now. So, passive voice, a simpler way to say it is, let me tell you again what was, the best of all the advices that I gave you. He states the reason for speaking it again, considering that you are exceedingly dear to me. Thus, meaning for this reason, I will speak of the highest good for you. So one to be dear means that one wishes the well-being of the dear one. And there's Anishta Shankani Band, I forget there's a phrase, but Jiva Gosvami refers to a statement of classical Sanskrit literature to convey what it means to be a bandhu, or to have a bond with someone. And he explains that simply to mean those about whose, those when threats to their well-being arise, one feels concerned, are one's bandhus, or are those for whom one has a bond, or one, in other words, what does it mean to care about someone? It means, in a negative sense, to feel concerned when some threat or some inconvenience or some difficulty comes to that person for whom you care. But that's the literal sense. But the point is that a bandhu means those for whom whose well-being you care about. So here in this case, by saying to Arjuna that you are very dear to me, implies that I want what's best for you, so I want to make sure that you understand what is the best advice that you can follow. So to care about someone is to look after their well-being. So Krishna, looking after the well-being of Arjuna, again states the most important teaching that he has to give him. Alternately, the meaning is as follows: you are dear to me, and you have determined that what is going to be said by me is firm, that is, arrived at by all valid means of knowing, or pramanas. So I elaborated on that last time, I won't elaborate on that again, but it's an interesting second meaning that's given only by Samipad. And that Dridam Moti is a second reading, that also we discussed last time. So, just to have this in mind, so we can see where Chakravarti Pad goes with it based on Samipad's commentary, I read it again, but not to excessively take too much time for what we discussed last time. So, now we'll look at Chakravarti Pad, this is 1864. Thereafter, observing his dear friend Arjuna silently standing and proceeding to contemplate this exceedingly profound Gita Shastra, Bhagavan, the butter of his heart melting out of grace, says, O dear friend Arjuna, with 8 verses I myself will state the essence of all Shastras. Enough with the hardship of your contemplating them all. So Arjuna is, the Gita begins with his dejection, and now he's inquired and he's heard so many advices and so many things, and now lastly Krishna says, okay, there you go, you have it, I told you, now you do as you like. So now the full weight of all of that pressure that he's under, the whole weight of the battle and the future and everything that he's considering and weighing in the course of deciding how to act, that's all now churning in his mind, so to speak. So seeing Arjuna going through that process, that churning, if you will, then here it says that our Chakravarti reads it that Krishna's heart is melting, or his heart is softening, seeing all this churning going on in the mind of Arjuna. So then he says, let me help you. let me re-emphasize the gist. So in that way, he speaks these final verses. Regarding, quote, again, Bhuya, that which was spoken by me previously at the end of the chapter on the king of knowledges, or Rajavidya, and the king of the confidential, that is, the king of confidential teachings, in Bhagavad Gita 9:34, quote, be of mind fixed upon me, be my bhakta, be my worshipper. Offer obeisance to me. Certainly you will come to me, having engaged yourself, that is, body and mind, in this way as one sheltered in me, is the essence even of this Gita Shastra, which is possessed of the essence of the meaning of all Shastras. So of all Shastras, the Gita is said to be the essence, and of the whole Gita, this advice is said to be the essence. So I previously referred to this advice when I told you that I was going to teach you the king, or the best of all types of knowledge, and the best of all that is confidential. So when I mentioned that I'm saying the most confidential thing, then I said the most confidential thing. So remember when I said the most confidential thing after I told you that I was going to tell you the most confidential thing? Okay, here it is again. Regarding, quote, most confidential, the purport that there is nothing more confidential than this anywhere, and it remains undiminished by anything, by any means. So here's another, there's a comparative sense of most confidential, and then there's this sense that there's nothing that supersedes it. So this is the final thing that there is to be known. Then he states the reason for speaking this supreme advice: you are exceedingly dear to me, that is, you are my beloved friend. Thus, meaning for this reason, I will speak of the highest good for you. The purport is that without friendship, no one speaks of something greatly esoteric to anyone. So here, a little different sense. In the previous commentary, because you're dear to me, I'll tell you what is most important, because I'm concerned with your well-being. Another sense here is a sense also related to confidentiality, just as in friendships, there are sometimes, intimate statements or highly precious secrets that are shared, which aren't shared with persons with whom you don't have a certain level of intimacy, certain level of mutual trust. So Chakravarti Pad is taking Krishna's remark in this sense, that because we're friends, because we're so close, then I can tell you this very secret, precious knowledge. Okay, so Baladevi Pad's commentary is almost the same as the previous two, so I'm not putting here the entire thing, but he has a couple additional points, so I'm just adding the additional bits that where he differs from the previous commentators. So, quote, supreme means the supreme advice spoken of here is the essential substance of the Gita Shastra, which is even the essence of all the Shastras. The reason for speaking this supreme advice again is indicated by the statement Ishtosi, you are dearmost to me. You have determined my speech to be firm, that is arrived at or affirmed by all valid means of knowing, or pramanas. So that also was in Samipad's commentary. Thus I will speak of the highest good for you. This, that is what I will now advise you is the highest good, alone is to be performed by you as well. This is the purport. So this last bit of Baladevi Pad's commentary is particularly relevant to the usage of this citation here in the Caitanya-caritamrta. So, as we're discussing, here in the context of the Charitamrita, what is the instruction that is the object of the Shraddha of a person who's eligible for this path of bhakti? So this instruction is being shown to be the thing that the person has Shraddha in. So Baladevidibhushan is contextualizing this statement in the Gita by saying that this alone is to be performed by you as well. In other words, if it's the essence of all the teachings, if it's the final, ultimate, confidential knowledge that I'm giving you, then what's the implication of that? That this is what you should do. This is ultimately how to practically apply this entire thing. So that point is, it might be obvious, but that's the whole thing that's being stressed here in the Caritamrta, in the way this section of the Gita is being referred to, is that Krishna is stating this advice because this is ultimately what Arjuna can best apply himself to, and that one who has Shraddha in that advice is one who also arrives at that conviction that, yes, I'm going to follow this path specifically and not another. So thus, the reason that this whole idea of confidentiality is mentioned and so on is for the purpose of arriving at a singularity and of certainty about what it is that one should actually do, with conviction that that's the best possible thing that one can do, so that further down the road, one doesn't go, oh, well, that was good, but maybe there's something else better. So to preclude those further things, to say, yes, this is the thing I'm going to do, I've sufficiently diligently considered the matter, I don't need to worry about something else popping up, I can just apply myself to it, to acquire that level of conviction. That's the whole point of all the analysis. So, this purport given by Sri Baladevidibhushan Pad, that Sri Krishna's intention is that Arjuna ultimately act only in accord with his final supreme advice, is further affirmed by the reasoning given in the ensuing payars, here in the Caritamrta, and the statement of Bhagavan Sri Krishna cited from Bhagavatam to evidence them. So, that's more or less what I was just referring to. We'll see as the Caritamrta unfolds how this is the thrust. So, the supreme advice that Bhagavan Sri Krishna speaks in the second of the two verses under discussion, 1865, was stated by him earlier in 934, as we heard in Chakravarti Pad's Tika. So there's just a little difference in the final line of the verse. So it says, be of mind fixed upon me, my bhakta, my worshipper. Offer obeisance to me, you will come to me alone, having engaged yourself in this way as one who is sheltered in me. So here in the final bit of the Gita, we have the following verse, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam braja, where the idea of taking shelter of Krishna is stated. So in the case of Krishna stating the advice in 934, he speaks of being sheltered in him in the final foot of the verse, and thus there's no need for a second verse to state that point. So in one sense, we can say that this 934 more crisply or more concisely states the essence of instruction, and here in 1865, for the most part it's stated, but then also the reasoning or the purpose for it being stated is also said. So, therefore, to grasp the gist of this advice, we're going to look at the tikas on both 934 and 1865 because there's some interesting stuff in both places. So, Samipad, he comments like this. Showing the method of worship, bhajan, he concludes, man mana. You should be one whose mind is fixed upon me alone. Similarly, be a bhakta of me alone, that is, a servant of myself. Be my worshipper, that is, one whose conduct or nature is worship of me. And offer obeisance to me alone. In this way, by these means, being one whose shelter is in me, and engaging, that is, fully fixing the self, that is, the mind, in me, you will come to, that is, you will attain me alone, the embodiment of the highest bliss. So, nice, straightforward summarizing the comment. This is Samipad's presentation. So I present this so that when we look at how Chakravarti Pad or Baladevidibhushan Pad, we can see how they enrich or they, complement what is given by Samipad. So he states more or less similar things in his commentary in 1865, but he just adds the following. Living in this way, you will come, that is, you will attain me alone by means of the knowledge attained by my grace. And in this regard, do not foster any doubt, for you are dear to me. Thus truly, as it is, I promise you that you will attain me by following the supreme advice I have given you and am now giving you again. Okay, so here is Chakravarti Pad's reading. Be of mind fixed on me, manmana bhava, means being, first of all, solely my bhakta, think of me, and not rather, having become a jnani or a yogi, perform meditation on me. This is the meaning. So he says, manmana bhava mad bhakto. Be of mind fixed on me and be my bhakta. So the way Chakravarti Pad is saying is that don't be a person who's trying to meditate on me and then, for the sake of that, take up some bhakti. In other words, he's trying to show that Krishna's intent in this verse is not applicable to Jnana Mishra Bhakti, where people's aim is moksha, and they're using bhakti as a means of accomplishing their practice of yoga sadhana or jnana sadhana or what have you. So by saying manmana bhava and mad bhakto bhava, he's interpreting it that this precludes the idea that the bhakti mishra gyan or the jnana mishra bhakti of other categories of sadhakas are applicable to what is taught in this verse. Alternately, be of mind fixed on me means be one whose mind is one's own gift to me. Shamasundar, who am possessed of finely glistening wavy locks and a moon face that showers the nectar of sweet sidelong glances of grace in the midst of the creepers of my beautiful brows. So, to say that one should absorb the mind in him, then, well, let's remind ourselves of what that object of absorption is like a little bit. Sweeten the deal. Alternately, give your senses of hearing and so forth to me. Thus he says, be my bhakta, mad bhakta bhava. That is, perform service to me with all the senses by means of hearing about me, praising me, beholding my figure, cleaning my abode, anointing me, collecting flowers for me, and offering me garlands, ornaments, parasols, chamaras, and so on. Alternately give me fragrances, flowers, incense, lamps, and foods. Thus he says, be my worshipper, mad yaji bhava, that is, perform worship of me. Alternately, just offer obeisance to me. Thus he says, offer obeisance to me, mam namaskuru, that is, falling to the ground, offer an 8-limb or 5-limb obeisance. Of these 4, thinking of me, serving me, worshipping me, and offering obeisance to me, you should perform all or one of them. You will come to, that is, attain me alone. You should make an offering of your mind, an offering of your senses, beginning with that of hearing, or an offering of fragrances, flowers, and so on, and I will give my very self to you. I promise this to you. Have no doubt in this regard. This is the purport, as the word satyam means a promise or truth according to the Amar Kosh. So he's looking at it categorically, if you will, and saying, Krishna's ready to give himself to you, but you need to give him either your mind, your senses, some objects of the senses, or your body. So, whichever one you want, that'll do. So it's quite a good deal on your part. You have to give up this tiny finite thing called a few flowers or a few bits of incense, and Swayam Bhagavan himself is ready to give himself to you. So if you're up for the exchange, then this is what he's offering out of his affection for you. Or if it's too much, to go to the shop and buy some incense, then you could just, offer your own thoughts. They don't cost anything. It'll be free. I'm joking, but, obviously, as he explains in the chapter on Bhakti Yoga in chapter 12, where he lists a gradation of activities. He considers offering the mind the most difficult and something that only a few are eligible of doing. Those who are less eligible can practice contemplation or concentration upon him, and those who are less eligible can offer practical activities using the senses, such as hearing, chanting, worshipping, and so on. And those who are incapable of doing that can do whatever it is they already do, but at least in their mind offer that to Bhagavan. Like this, he gives a gradation in chapter 12. So I think what Chakravarti Pad is referring to here is he's hinting back to some of those statements in chapter 12 about this gradation. Okay, but a little more. Still, a doubt is raised. Well, people born in the region of Mathura make promises in every single sentence. So, this is a colloquial way of saying, well, how can I really believe you? Krishna, you say so many things. You're one of these people from Mathura, your speech is a little loose. You say it, but are you really going to do it? So, to convince Arjuna that he's really serious, he's really, really promising, and he's really going to follow through. To that he says, Pratijani priyosime, satyam, true. Therefore, taking an oath, I say you are dear to me, and no one cheats one who is dear. This is the purport. Means people might cheat other people. I mean, sorry, this is, the way he's reading it, but he's implying that you may cheat people who are not dear to you, but you can at least trust the person not to cheat the people who they really hold dear. So that much you can expect of me. This is how as if Krishna is saying like this to Arjuna. So, because no doubt this is the battle of Kurukshetra, there were a few tricks employed on those who were not held entirely dear. And, Arjuna's well aware of that. So perhaps something related to that context is why Chakravarti Pad draws out this sense. But whatever the case may be, the main point is that if one is going to trust Krishna's teachings, one has to trust that Krishna will also reciprocate with the person who follows them, as he says he will do so. So in this way it also shows that faith or trust in Krishna is the very edifice of the entire path of bhakti, of any, orientation or any interest in it whatsoever, is, the conviction or the confidence that the person who receives the bhakti is going to respond in kind to it. So if one doesn't have that conviction, why would one do it in the first place? They wouldn't do it. Therefore, you have to have that conviction in order to do it. Therefore, that conviction is what makes you eligible to follow it. Therefore, Shraddha is the adhikar for bhakti. This is the gist of the whole point that's being explained. Okay, so then let's have a look at Baladeva Vibhushan's comments. He has a few nice insights to share as well. Quote, a servant of a king, although he is a bhakta of the king, is of mind fixed upon his own wife and so forth. And although he is of mind fixed upon them, that is, on his wife, son, family, house, whatever, he is not a bhakta of them. You, however, differently from him, that is, such a servant of a king, should be both of mind fixed upon me and my bhakta. So this is a nice point, that here the bhakta would be in the sense of, someone who's performing a service. So he's a minister, or he's an assistant to the king. So he spends most of his time, and his practical activities are activities of service and assistance to the king. But in his heart and mind, who he really holds dear, who he really thinks about, who he really wants to please, is his wife and his family. So he exists in this situation where he wants to please certain people, but he's serving other people. In other words, he has to serve other people in order to some extent, get the facility and opportunity and resources and time to be able to serve and please the people he actually wants to please. So this is not entirely desirable because what's better is when you get the chance to both directly serve the people that you want to please. Then you get maximum efficiency of your time, thought, energy, expression, everything goes precisely to the fulfillment of what it is that your heart wants to achieve. So he's saying that that this advice, mon mana bhavan mod bhakto, be my bhakta and be one who's thinking of me, means don't, hold dear and don't think of one person but have to serve another, but rather, think of me and serve me. In other words, bring it all into integration and alignment. Which is also to imply, don't worship me for the sake of getting something else. Make worship of me itself your goal, or in other words, make prema the purushartha itself. You should be one whose mind is continuously fixed, like an unbroken stream of honey, upon me, the son of Vasudeva, possessed of qualities beginning with blue lily swarthiness, by virtue of understanding me to be your Svami, that is, possessor or Lord, and to be the goal of your human life. Similarly, you should be my worshipper, that is, you should be engaged in worship of me, who am exceedingly dear to you as such, that is, since I am your Swami, your ultimate object of attainment, and possessed of innumerable wonderful qualities. You should offer obeisance, that is, a prostrate obeisance, with abounding prema to me, as such. In this way, having engaged, that is, having offered the mind, that is, the self, meaning the mind and the body, and being sheltered in me, that is, being one whose sole shelter is me, you will come to me. It is to be understood that this bhakti, constituted of the aforementioned acts, should be first offered and then performed. That is, they should be performed by one who first of all has taken shelter in me, become a Sharanagata, and is dedicated to satisfying me. Okay, so that was the way he explains the verse in 934. And then I also have here his commentary from 1865. So when the verse repeats, then he adds the following. He declares this advice, mon mana bhava. He speaks this verse. This statement was explained previously in the commentary on 934. Being one possessed of having fixed the mind on me and so forth, as was described, you will come to me alone. Krishna specifically, the son of Devaki, who is situated in human form, exceedingly dear to you, and possessed of the qualities of being swarthy like a blue lily, and so forth. And not, rather, another form of mine, such as that characterized by having thousands of heads, and so on, meaning the Sahasra Shirsha Purusha, who's worshipped in the Vedas by the Purusha Shukta form of Garbhodakshai Vishnu. Or the irregular, only a thumb in height, as meditated upon by yogis. Or those known as Nrsimha, Varaha, and so on, or any other avatars. So this point is also important, that when Krishna is using these personal pronouns, I, me, from me to me, then the commentator is implying that these are meant to be taken in this sense literally of referring to Krishna himself, not that some may take it that, Vishnu performed this avatar as Krishna, Krishna gave these teachings in the Gita, and when he says you will come to me, that really means that you will reach Vishnu in Vaikuntha. This is how Vaishnavas of other sampradayas, they may interpret the teachings. So, okay, if they want to interpret them like, no problem, we're not going to object. But for persons following Jiva Goswami's line of thought, for persons whose Ishta Devata is specifically Brajendra Nandan Sri Krishna, whom, according to the view of the Bhagavat, is Swayam Bhagavan himself, then when he says, you will come to me, then it really means me, Krishna, the person Krishna, who's giving these teachings, not another avatar, not the Paramatma, not the Garbhodakshai Vishnu, not, this, that, or various other things. So this is relevant, and this is something that pervades much of the Goswami's Siddhanta, and is based on what is called tat kratu nyaya, or this principle of specific intention, that one will achieve whatever it is that they fixate the mind upon. So the specificity of what one conceives ultimately is very important, because it produces samskaras which ingrain in the psyche the tendency to think about those very contents again and again and again, and to have, a tendency towards, or a gravity towards, such objects. So, in that way, the Goswami's privilege, bhakti dedicated to a specific Ishta Devata above what they call Samanya Bhakti. This is in Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, where the idea of bhakti to Bhagavan, and it may be to Ram or to Krishna or to Vishnu, and the exact object of bhakti is considered fluid, that they categorize as, bhakti of the most initial or the most preliminary rank. And that bhakti that is dedicated to a specific Ishta Devata has far more potential for intensity of pleasure for Bhagavan and for depth of prem, of feeling on the part of the bhakta. So, in this way, the idea of tat kratu nyaya ultimately applies to, or compounds in the Goswami Siddhanta to what it as the underlying principle of Raganuga Bhakti, or the aspiration for the bhava of a particular parikara, of a particular manifestation of Bhagavan, such that one is specific in one's intention and aspiration, whereby all of the activity, the thought, the sadhana that one does throughout one's life can compound, can enrich, can fortify samskaras for that specific object of aspiration or desire, since the adhikar, the eligibility that makes one able to proceed and succeed on the path of Raganuga Bhakti is intense desire or lobha, and desire is entirely a product of the vasana, the samskaras that one has. So sadhana is the generation, if you will, of such samskaras which fortify such desires, which then produce such absorption of the mind. And according to Rupa Goswami, it is sadhan abhinivesh, or it is the absorption in the sadhana that comes about after the purging of other desires from the psyche, or chitta shuddhi at the stage of nishta, that leads to the intensifying, fulfilling experiences of ruchi, which lead to one's mind becoming fully absorbed, such that it becomes purged of all else and fit to receive a self-manifestation of bhava bhakti, or what is called Krishna rati. So, anyway, I don't mean to excessively elaborate, but just to bring the point back that Baladeva Vibhushan is putting a highlighter on the specificity of Krishna saying, "You will come to me," to indicate to Arjuna that he wants Arjuna to practice this bhakti, or to do these activities, not with the idea that he's meditating on Krishna, or he's worshipping Krishna, or he's bowing down to Krishna to get something else, or to go somewhere else, or achieve something else, but actually Krishna himself is his shelter, his object of love, his object of attainment, his object of service, his all in all, his sar sarvasya. And that is precisely how this very chapter began, and exactly what was the essence of the conclusion of all the Sambandha Tattva that was discussed in chapter 20 and 21, that Krishna ak sar, that Krishna is the one essence, Krishna is the one ultimate object, and to have that principle pervade the entirety of one's view and aspiration and so on is the very essence of what all these teachings are about. So, I just thread that in to show how all the topic of the Sambandhi Tattva throughout 20 and 21 that we discussed is ultimately fortifying and underlying this discussion of the Abhideya and the means of practicing it. Okay, one final paragraph here. Still a doubt is raised. Well, destruction of my doubt does not occur even by your making a promise, because of your being from Mathura. So again, there seems, he's implying that these people from Mathura are not always completely true to their word, it appears. So you're claiming it, but how can I have confidence in your claim? So to this he says, I am speaking having taken an oath, since you are dear to me, and people from Mathura, who are of tender mind, do not cheat one who is dear, much less one who is most dear, like you. This is the purport. For one who has great love or priti for me, so too do I have great priti for him. I am unable to tolerate separation from him, and thus previously it was stated by me, quote, I am extremely dear to the Jnani, and he is dear to me. Therefore, trust my words, you will attain me alone. So, because I hold you so dear, have no doubt that I'm being completely forthcoming and that I will be completely true to my word. You will devote yourself to me, and I too will completely give of myself to you. As he stated also in that Rajavidya chapter, Samoham sarvabhuteshu name dveshti name priya, that I'm equal to everyone. No, I don't, have any enmity towards anyone. I don't hold anyone particular dear. But ye bhajantyamam bhaktya mai te teshu chapyaham. But for those who worship me with bhakti, then as they are in me, so I am in them. Or as they have affection and attachment to me, so too I reciprocally have corresponding attachment in them. So if you, Arjuna, can actually do what I advise you and fix your mind upon me, be my bhakta, hold me dear as such, then you can be fully confident that I will reciprocally hold you also dear to me. So this is Krishna's promise or his oath to his bhakta, and it is shraddha or confidence in that oath of Krishna or that promise of Krishna made on the strength of, or on the swearing upon, if you will, his capability to love, or the fact that he will be true to those who he holds dear. In other words, the fact that he is loving is ultimately the collateral that gives the oath weight. So this all is, the core content of the conviction that inspires or that enables a bhakta to follow this path of bhakti. So, I think I'll stop there for today. That ends this long, discussion of this verse, so we can start fresh with the next payars and the conclusion in the Caritamrta of why these verses in the Gita are being cited. We can do that in our next discussion. So, I'll pause here. If anyone has comments, questions, corrections, or feedback of any other type, please feel free to share. All right, very well. Hopefully things were clear. So, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. If we're so blessed, well, then we'll continue our discussion of the Sanatana Shiksha next week. Jai Guru, Jai Gaur, Jai Jai, Radhe Shyam.
Jai Shri Radhe.